Let's take a look at how we can create, type, and edit type inside of Illustrator. Now, Illustrator probably isn't what you think of as an application that can create things like menus, brochures, postcards, and so on. But it does a very, very good job at that. Now, when you need to do some heavy-duty stuff like doing books or magazines, then I highly suggest you go to something like Adobe InDesign. You have a lot more control, and you be able to control your fonts and your text and your images for that kind of formatting much more accurately. But for small things, Illustrator is great. So I'm going to move this guy down, and we're going to create some type. First thing I'm going to do is grab this tool right here called the Type tool. I'll click anywhere in my document, and then I'm given an I-beam. Now, of course, this I-beam is pretty large because it remembers the last thing I had selected. So your I-beam might be a little bit larger or smaller based on what you finished doing last with the Type tool. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put in a word, and as you know, I would like to be very literal, and I have a word here. So here's my word, and it's squashed, and I'm going to explain why once we get to the character panel. Now, I have two ways that I can change this text. I can highlight it, and I can go up here where it says character, and I can go to this little drop-down list, and I can change it to something else. I can also change the size, and we'll talk about these options in just a moment. So I'm going to grab my selection tool and click away from this text that he selected. Now that doesn't look very good at all. So I'm going to show you another way to change the size of your text. So I'm going to click on it with the selection tool, and I'm going to click in the corner handles here, and I'm going to literally just manually drag this out. And I've increased the size of this. And Illustrator does know exactly how big this font is, because once I go to the character menu, you'll see that it's 179 points. So let's talk about how we can change some of the colors here. What if I want to change the color of the entire word? Well, make sure you have your selection tool, click on the word itself anywhere, and grab your swatch, change the color. I can also go down here. What if I want to change just one letter? Well, I'm going to double click anywhere in this word, and I can take my I-beam and grab a letter and change the color. So I'll go over here, grab a swatch, and now I have a purple W. Let me go ahead and close these guys. Now let's talk about the character panel. I'll go to the window menu, and I'm going to go to where it says type, and I'll grab character. Now this is the same thing as we saw before up here, but I like to have this panel open instead of clicking on that text all the time. So we have some other options in here. Well, as you know by now, this is our font, and this other field here is called a style. All fonts don't have a wide variety of styles, so if you don't see more than one word in here or one sentence, don't be alarmed. Alright, so now you notice that nothing changes, right? Why is it nothing changing? Because I don't have the word selected. So I have to click on the word so that Illustrator knows what I want to do. Now, it will take place when I click on an option. So what about the rest of these guys down here? What do they do? Well, we have our font size, which we already talked about. Now, if you're doing sentences, if you have like 5 or 6 sentences, for example, you have something called leading, which is this option here. Leading changes the spacing in between each sentence. Now, the rule of thumb with leading is that the leading should be 2 points greater than the font size. So if our font is 180 points, our leading for maximum readability should be 182. Now, once again, that's a general rule of thumb, so definitely consult with your art director before you go ahead and change that. We also have the ability to change the spacing in between 2 characters, which would be something like the W and the O. And this is called kerning. Tracking is when we're able to change the spacing in between the selected characters. We also have something called horizontal and vertical scale. Now these allow us to stretch and squash our selected word. So I'll go ahead and take the horizontal and make it 50%, make it 200%. I'll put it back at 100. And I'll do the same thing with the vertical. I'll make this 90, I'll make it 25, and I'll make it 200. We also have the ability to change the baseline and the character rotation. You can also make it underlined and strike through. Strike through is good when you're working with an author, for example, and you want to say, hey, this word shouldn't be here, get rid of that. All right, so that is how we can create and edit type inside of Illustrator.